Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episodes, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy a lot of things today because today we have a new guest, Ma'am Gail, and she's an activist and she has a lot of contributions in that arena, especially. Beside that, we have Professor Donalds, Mr. Rob, Dr. Williams, as well as Mr. Alex. And I'm sure because I want to give a lot of good news because from the different government and university every day, at least 10 different university, they are communicating with World Talent Economic Forum. They are distributing our resources in between their students. Good news is that in Malaysia from the next month, international students border opens. So I think many of the international students in Malaysia, they are very happy because government already declared they are opening their border with other countries. And the most important thing is that our SDG goals and other things next year, we have a proposal from International Islamic University that we can do a conference on sustainability. And I'm sure from today's discussions, there is a many youth communities. Our target is 100 million people. Already, we are trying to reach more than 5 million people in offline, not only in online, and hopefully we will be successful. We are distributing laptop, tabs, as well as we are collaborating as much as possible different kind of knowledge centers. So I want to start with Ma'am Gail. Uh, can you please introduce yourself? And I'm sure that our audience really happy that you joined in World Talent Economic Forum.
Yes, good morning. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Gail McNulty, and I live in Santa Cruz, California. I work for an ocean nonprofit called Save Our Shores, and I'm a mother. I have 3 kids. They're 9, 13, and 15, and so I'm engaged in the climate conversation on many levels, and really just in what we're doing to this planet. And I'm also part of the local anti-racism conversation, and I'm just deeply passionate about doing what we can to really transform our world into one where we put people and the planet ahead of profit and manage to create a future where future setups so that everyone on this planet can thrive to the best degree possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have our Dr. William. He's a very good policymaker, and he also help us to develop different kind of policy and other things. So how we can start today's discussions and how you want to introduce our guest for today?
Well, I'm reminded of the title of a television series, although don't hold me specifically to who produces it, although it's titled My Next Guest Needs No Introduction. And there we have it with Rob and Professor Donald and Alex, and of course you, Dr. Sharif. I think that with regard to life below water, the significant items to deal with really all just come back to global warming and the release of the CO2 into the air. Now, our oceans, which cover more than 50%, I assume, of the planet, are the one of the largest ways that CO2 is absorbed and taken out of our atmosphere. However, there's always the other side of the coin. And the other side of the coin is that because the oceans have been absorbing the increased concentration levels of CO2, they've become more acidic. And then that has had the cascading effects of barrier reef deterioration, which single-handedly, there are a number of separate studies that deal with barrier reef life cycles and ecosystems, and they find that barrier reefs in and of themselves are significant indications of the health of the sea, because they are wildly diverse and unique and cannot be replaced, because coral reefs take thousands and thousands of years in order to develop a full-blown ecosystem. Nevertheless, what we have is an increase in the pH levels in the oceans because of the increased absorption of CO2 from the atmosphere, which ultimately goes back to the issues of climate change. And with that, I will certainly defer to Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. How do you want to introduce to this agenda, and what the point of view you have regarding this agenda?
Well, we're mostly water on this planet. We spend an awful lot of time polluting the water resources that we have. For instance, there are just 10 streams that carry 95% of the ocean-borne plastics, and plastics have become a major problem with regard to keeping the oceans clean. There are a number of efforts to try to fix that. Some of the largest multinationals that I work with have programs to reuse or to harvest and then reuse the ocean-borne plastics. But really, the larger sustaining efforts are to create plastics that can properly degrade, or not use plastics at all, and maybe discontinue practices like bottled water. But in the end, preserving the oceans is one of our greatest failures, I think, to date, and we aren't moving quickly enough to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Donalds, how are you today? How do you want to add to this problem?
I'm great. 10% of the food that we eat comes from protein from the ocean globally, and that varies a lot from country to country. In some countries, it's significantly more, in some countries, it's less. Some countries are vegetarians, and they're not anywhere close to the ocean, so they can't use the oceans for protein sources. And right now, a lot of fisheries are collapsing. For instance, Atlantic cod, if you may or may not have seen pictures of the crusty old fisherman going out in his rain slickers, but that image is going away because there is no Atlantic cod anymore for them to fish, or there's so little that the fisheries can't sustain themselves. So what fishery collapse means is when some species of fish winds up being so both killed by pollution and overfished to the point that they don't have a large enough community for them to sustain themselves, and they go away. Interestingly enough, right now, the species that's doing the best in the ocean is jellyfish. And years ago, millions of years ago, jellyfish were the predominant fish in the ocean, or not, they're not fish, the predominant species in the ocean. And as the other fish leave, the ones, or die, the ones that eat jellyfish, basically the jellyfish are coming back, and jellyfish are becoming dominant again in various parts of the ocean. So that is a real problem, because when you get to overfishing, after you get from the territorial waters 12 miles from the coasts of most countries, then it's basically a commons. And the idea of a commons goes to a paper called The Tragedy of the Commons, where he discussed the idea of a village where every person can use this shared area, a commons, to have their cattle or usually cattle feed. And if one person decides that they want to have more cattle than everyone else, then then that person winds up having his cattle eat all the grass, so that the other people don't have any resources left. And the ocean is a commons where all of us have been using it as a resource. Most of it's international. And the same thing happens if any one person or any one country or any one group of people decides that they want to have more than the rest, then what winds up happening is that, again, it doesn't leave any for everybody else. And over the last few decades, the ability to catch more fish has grown significantly with incredible trawling nets that are miles and miles and miles long, and other kinds of things where people can, through technological reasons, take a lot more than others. So one of the main issue is how we're going to work together to be able to sustain the fisheries. And there's we'll talk about it more, but there are things that are being done. The tragedy of commons is not set in steel. There are people who've successfully shared commons without government intervention and without businesses owning them. So that's one, those are the two main ideas of what you do with commons, is that regulations, you regulate the commons through governments and international organizations, or somebody owns the commons, and when they own the commons, some corporation or entity, combinations of corporations, then they manage it effectively themselves because it's beneficial for their business. And however, the difficulty is that, as I said, after you get 12 miles from the coast of most countries, it's a commons, and there's nobody that can regulate it. So global fishing regulations and global fishing agreements can't be enforced. So that's basically what I'm going to be discussing as the show goes on.
Thank you, Professor. We have our energetic friends, Mr. Alex. How do you want to introduce?
Yes,
today's session.
Yeah. Hello, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Gail, for joining us. We've had so many of these wonderful conversations, intellectually stimulating conversations with these professionals, these experts, and it's really benefited us and the people that have watched. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm always thankful, and I value being on these panels with such brilliant people and the ideas that we've come up with, and Sharif putting this together and getting this information out to such a larger audience, basically to help make the world a better place. And so a lot of the panelists on this forum have covered some of the key subjects that I was going to cover. So ocean acidity and acidification is a huge problem. So pollution clearly is a huge problem around the world. We're finding pollution in very remote regions of the ocean and great depths of the ocean. So there's different forms of pollution. Of course, there's plastic pollution. There's chemical pollution that has to do with the runoff of synthetic fertilizers, chemicals, rodenticides, insecticides, everything that we're using to grow food. And again, that's why I'm a strong supporter of eating organic. I generally eat organic, and I have for approximately the last 10 years. Even if you vote with your money and you buy organic once in a while, even one time, one organic thing in your shopping cart helps make a difference. And organic's not always USDA certified organic. It could mean going to your farmer's market and eating organic, or picking fruit from the tree in your backyard that you're just not benefiting from. So mining is something that we're going to be concerned about in the future, as they're continuing to incorporate new technologies, new mining machines that actually drive around on the ocean floors. So there's a lot of stuff we have to worry about, as it will cause ecosystem disruptions. And I'm thankful and fortunate that I've had the opportunity to visit the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which I'm sure Gail's been to many times. It's right here in the Monterey Bay. We live in some sort of protected sanctuary, so we need more of those protected sanctuaries around the world. That would help solve a lot of the problems with overfishing that Donald mentioned. There are these tracking devices on boats, and when they travel through international waters or non-international waters, it tracks where the boats go. So when they start approaching protected areas, it alerts maybe the Coast Guard, and then they go in and it's regulated. Unfortunately, sometimes they find a way to dismantle these and turn it off so they can get into these areas. It's so sad and so interesting that if you look at some of these charts, you'll see a huge concentrated volume of boats and dots and these marks where these they're sending out these pings, these GPS signal pings, and they're pushed up against these protected areas, basically like they're waiting for the fish and the sea life to cross these boundaries so they can catch them. It's really disturbing, but they are keeping a lot of these boats and these vessels out of protected areas. So I recently went to that link and it was no longer functioning. I don't know if they took down the website or they changed the URL. I'll try to provide that again. It's really interesting. You can see most of the boats around the world and all the fishing vessels and what areas they're into. So again, we need to support protected areas. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has slowed down our potential progress and loosened some of those restrictions and stuff. So got to work on that. Coral reef die-off is something we might want to talk in this conversation. It is a huge issue. It's caused coral reef die-off to a very large, or the majority of the portion of coral around Australia. So what I want to mention that mammals and people, we are really resilient when it comes to the ocean temperature. To temperatures, atmospheric temperatures. How we could handle that, how our body fluctuates, regulates our temperature. Now with fish, it's not like that. Animals and aquatic life. Gail might be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but they can only handle like 1 to 2 degree temperature fluctuations before it drastically starts affecting them or their species. I forgot to mention that there are different types of pollution. Some of these are specifically related to ocean and this topic, and others are not. So there's water pollution, which is one. There's air pollution, thermal pollution, soil pollution, radioactive pollution, light pollution, and noise pollution. Those are the different types. It's good to know about that when you're talking about pollution. So thermal pollution is also concerning, like what I'm referring to. So we have a lot of, again, I think the majority of the nuclear power plants at ocean level around the world, and they're sucking in ocean water to cool down the reactors, and the consequence of that is it's dumping out hot water back into the ocean, and that is increasing the temperature of the water in that area definitely by over a degree and temperature. So that's concerning. That's another reason why it's important for us to transition away from nuclear energy and transition to renewable energies. Okay, so oil spills are also a huge problem, of course. So regulation, I think, would help solve a lot of this, and transitioning towards renewable energies. So rising ocean levels. So the last thing that I want to mention, I have a very, very unique perspective in doing disaster relief. Not only have I been to a lot of developing countries around the world after disasters, earthquakes, tornado chasing and all of that, blizzards. I have had the chance, and I've been through 7 hurricanes. As a journalist, I've been on the front lines, like right where the hurricane makes landfall. I've also covered the aftermath of 5 major hurricanes. That's including Superstorm Haiyan that devastated the Philippines. It actually killed 5,000 or 6,000 people. And Hurricane Katrina, I covered that one, and a lot of the other major hurricanes, Isaac, Michael, Gustav, a lot of other historic hurricanes that people may remember. So in Harvey as well. So in covering all of these hurricanes, I've seen the rise in ocean sea level and how it completely not only devastates coastal regions, but how it just destroys all of those homes. And then all of that just gets washed back out into the ocean. And I can't even, I've like cried walking down the beach to where like you just see nothing but just pollution, trash. You see dead animals. It's horrible. And it's so unimaginable. I mean, what I've seen with how bad hurricanes destroy coastal regions, destroy homes and businesses, and take all of that out into the ocean, and all the dead animals that I've seen, and just the uncomprehendable amount of pollution. And then the sad fact is that most of pollution actually sinks, and most plastics. So what you actually see washed up on the coast is just a small percentage of the impact we're causing. So I wish that we wouldn't build at coastal areas, especially hurricane-prone regions, and we would stop giving insurance settlements to people that just continue to build houses in those dangerous regions. So that's my introduction, and thanks again for this panel and this opportunity.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add few of the target of the UN, target 14.7 by 2030, increase the economic benefit to small island developing state and least developed countries from the sustainable use of marine resources, including through sustainable management of fisheries, aquaculture and tourism. and increase scientific knowledge development, research capacity, and transfer marine technology, taking into the account of intergovernmental oceanographic commission's criteria and guideline of the transfer of marine technology. Provide access for all small scale I think fisheries and this kind of things. I directly want to ask Ma'am Gail that what do you think that practically this kind of initiative like creating different kind of knowledge hub and research center and innovation things, and is it practically possible? What do you think? You are activist and you have organizations, you have practical lot of experience on that particular point.
Yes, thank you. I mean, honestly, one of the things that gives me hope right now in what honestly, well, I think we're living through a time that intellectually is actually hopeless. I think what we're living through right now, what we're facing in terms of science and what the ways that we're dealing with it, with our policy and our leveling is better than nothing and unrealistic. Really, the all of what we're shooting for is not yet enough. And again, better than nothing, but yet not yet enough. And at the crux of all of this, and where I'd actually honestly like to challenge this conversation to go, is really a much, much higher level. What we're dealing with, and I like that Donald brought up the idea of the commons, is a question of superiority, you know, white superiority, northern superiority. I mean, the fact that for way too long, some people on this planet have felt that they have the right to control everything. You know, they've been living under this myth that we can control everything. And that's something that we're beginning to need to face, because it's not true. It never has been true. It has racist and, you know, classist foundations, and that is at the crux of all of our problems. You know, the climate crisis is going to impact people in the global south first and foremost, and hardest it already is. You know, people even in the United States who live in, you know, our underserved, the communities that we pleasantly call underserved, but really the communities that have been left out of everything, the communities that have suffered for too long, the communities that some people have felt the right to leave out. You know, just that idea, the idea that some people can have whatever we want, and it's okay for other people to suffer in poverty, have our pollution wash up on their beaches, have our, you know, factories ruin their air. Just that idea that that is somehow okay is really what we need to evolve beyond. This is an evolution point for humanity. And we're either going to bring a moral compass to everything we do, or we're going to say goodbye to everything we've known and loved.
Okay. Dr. William.
Yes.
Yes. How do you want to add this point? And specifically, UN has some goals, and I think Madam Gail has different perceptions. So what do you want to add for today's session?
Well, first I want to say that I wholeheartedly agree with Gail's assessment. I mean, the notion, and with the deepest amount of respect and awe, Gail, that we're at an evolution point where we're going to actually, I don't know that we need a moral compass. I think that we have one. The question is whether or not we're going to apply it, or whether or not there's enough energy and people to support the imposition of a moral compass. And that cuts across the board. And I'm astounded by your cross connection between the superiority, whether it's based on race, whether it's based on region, whether it's based on nation, and the allocation of our resources. So with that having been said, some of the goals, I think that, at least from the United Nations standpoint, are incremental and incremental approaches, because Gail, I think that you're absolutely right that we're at a point where we just don't know, and we're talking about it, and it may be unreasonable, maybe unrealistic, but at least we're talking about it. And the problem is so large that, at least right now, that it may seem intractable, but at least we have to have the hope and belief that we can actually do something about it. And I think on that point, with regard to the United Nations Sustainable Goals, and I think it's specifically Sustainable Goal 12, just for the audience, when they go and they can look it up and they can see what the UN is talking about, is that they are thinking about, and this touches upon some of the issues that Donald raised earlier, the issue of sustainable fisheries. What the UN is suggesting that people explore is the creation and the more and the implementation of sustainable fisheries. We commonly refer to them oftentimes as farm-raised fish. And on that point, the UN's studies so far have suggested that farm-raised fish add to the overall GDP for each and every country. And with regard to smaller states, island nations, or developing nations, cultivating aquaculture through whether it's fisheries or artisanal or specialty fish, produce jobs and the economy and food nations. One thing I do want to just diverge for a moment, and that's simply this, that it's something that is achievable, that we can do, at least leading here in the United States, and that is for so long, we've often celebrated, as environmentalists have celebrated, the creation of national parks and national preserves, whether it be to stop oil drilling or to save animals or species and ecosystems. And currently, globally, there's a fight over the Amazon. I certainly understand that. But during the Obama administration, President Obama went and created national in Hawaii, doubling the size of the then existing one in Hawaii with the Marine National Preserve, something on the order of twice the size of Texas, and then also created one off the shores of New England. And so in that regard, if the United States wants to be more of a leader in this area, that can certainly be done through executive order. And the first creation of national parks and use of that kind of authority came under Theodore Roosevelt back in like 1912. So that's something that the United States can do independently, and we can begin to set an example by leading through the world. And we ought to, as Gail suggested, start to think larger than just land-based items, because as Rob suggested, the majority of the nation is I'm curious to learn more from Donald about these common areas, because that's a concept that I know nothing about.
Thank you, Mr. Rob.
Yes, hi. A lot of the issue, I think, as we look at the problem, is that our resources are not only sparse, but they're spread across a large number of efforts, and there isn't a great deal of, at least from my perspective, a great deal of focus on any one problem so that we can address it. The economics of addressing pollution have been problematic because it certainly has historically been easier and cheaper to pollute than it has been to address the pollutants. And much of the pollution we're talking about has only occurred in the last three or four decades. And it's increasing, it's not decreasing. And so when we ask people to change their behavior to address a problem like this, by and large, populations say no. They value the economics above the strategic initiative of saving the planet. And I think at some particular point in time, we need to address those behavioral issues, because if you can't get to where you want to go on the path you're on, then we need to find another path. Science is stepping up, trying to find plastics or alternatives to plastics that properly biodegrade. But those efforts need a lot of help, and they come closer to saying, okay, you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. You can continue to throw things out, but if those things don't harm the environment, then at least you're not doing damage. And that seems to be a more sustainable path than trying to get people to change, because by and large, over the last decade and a half, we've had very little impact on the way people consume. In fact, in many ways, we've gotten worse. If you look simply at bottled water, we go back 20 years or so, and people were arguing bottled water was stupid, and I kind of wish we were still there. And then we take other things like, for instance, straws, and then we blow them out of proportion. And while that kind of pollution certainly is bad, it's not as bad as others. And what it does is create a dissatisfaction, a disbelief in science because you have something that is relatively easily disproved as a major problem, getting the major headlines. And so you're bringing some rationale to this, doing some social engineering, and getting people to want to do the right thing rather than government sitting down and telling them they have to. Because as we've seen during the COVID pandemic, when you tell people to do the right thing for some screwy reason, they want to rebel, and we can't ignore that in terms of behavior. We really do need to engineer these fixes with the idea that you're asking humans to do something they don't necessarily want to do, and that means they've got to trust your advice. The advice has to, when implemented, provide real change. And then you have to tell the people that their efforts have been beneficial. I mean, take one big area like recycling. Much of our recycling ends up in landfills. We're telling people to put stuff in recycling bins, and then we're dumping it in landfills, and that's getting covered. And so people say, well, if what I'm doing is not doing any good, then why do I want to do it? And it breaks that line of trust between the citizens and government that makes doing things like this even possible. Because if people don't believe they're making a difference, then why should they strive, or why should they sacrifice? And so it really goes to the heart of engineering people to do what we want them to do strategically for the betterment of the planet. And we are not focused at all on dealing with that strategic problem. We are degrading our information sources. We are degrading trust, and we tend to jump from real or artificial crisis to real or artificial crisis with no distinction between the two. And as a result, we're going in the wrong direction in many cases, and companies and industries are trying to step in and clean up the mess, but we've got to stop making the mess in the first place. So I really think at the heart of this problem is the fact we really don't understand people very well. And until we do, our programs to address this problem will fall woefully short.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to pick up on that thought and just raise a slight question to it. I think that understanding people and human nature isn't so much the problem as understanding the repercussions of the disposable culture that our economy has created, and also the speed at which globalization has developed. Because truth be known, people are generally good. People are born with a natural impulse to love one another and do the right thing. It's not human nature that's the problem. The problem is we have created, because of this idea that it's okay for some people to profit, make ungodly amounts of money while others suffer, because that's not an idea, it's just sort of a given in our economy. And because of that, we have created this culture and economy that depend really on all of us actually hating ourselves. And this is an idea that comes from Sonia Renee Taylor, is not an apology. Our economy depends on us hating ourselves. It depends on us feeling the need to change, feeling a lack, feeling that self-worth and net worth are one and the same, feeling that what we wear, what we own, what we show is what makes us, and that's ridiculous, right? I mean, that is a big part of our problem. We have created a disposable world where people and the planet are disposable too. And that, again, it's like, this is the level of conversation that we need to have if we want to fix things. There's nothing you can put in your grocery cart that's going to make a difference or save the day. And one of the things that gives me hope, honestly, is I've had the opportunity over the past couple of years to work with the youth climate movement. So I've been working with the U.S. side of that, the young people, which is largely led by the International Indigenous Youth Council and the Future Coalition. But these young people, the Sunrise Movement, these young people who are literally feeling their future at risk, disappearing, they have it. I mean, there's Greta Thunberg, right, which everybody knows, but really there are so many young people. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, You know, I taught high school in the Bronx years ago. She's the same age as the students I taught in my ninth grade class. She is sitting there and she is putting it out on a limb. She has the courage that we need all of our elected officials to have. You know, the courage to question. One of our problem as a democracy is that we don't. Not only do we not encourage young people to grow up questioning, we completely discourage it. Everything I mean, I grew up in the Reagan brainwashed era. I learned from the Sunrise Movement what happened during my youth. I didn't know. I was totally blind. I honestly only woke up 2 years ago. Another thing that gives me hope. All of us can wake up and learn that we've all been brainwashed. You know, we've all been raised to think that the way we're living is okay and can go on forever, but it can't. It's ridiculous. And not only that, it makes us sad. We are living in a disposable world where we're all disposable, and that will never lead to happiness. The truth is letting go and valuing people and realizing what our lives are doing to other people and just acting on our desire to love, learning to love. Our culture raises people not knowing how to love because money is why it's like, anyways.
Okay, thank you, Professor Donald. Yeah.
Well, there's two things that came up. First, I would like to talk about more about the basic economics of fishing and and fisheries and sea life, but I want to start out by addressing the concept of human nature and how people work with each other, because that's what I study and write about. Last night, I mentioned in an earlier show Edward Bernays, who I forget the name of the movie. There's a movie about it, and Edward Bernays is considered the father of public relations. Partially by himself, he was kind of a blowhard, but he also was Freud's nephew and was the first person who brought psychology into mass communications. And one of his books was called Propaganda. And he was famous for creating desires for people for things that they didn't desire before. And one of his famous things that he did was he had an event where all the women smoked, and he propagandized it as being feminist, so that if women wanted to be more of a part of society and raise their status so that they were more powerful, and that they would smoke. And it worked. And one of the things that he observed, he wrote a book called Propaganda in 1928, and one of the things that he observed is people don't make decisions intellectually. So one of the things that we find with talking about climate change is no matter how many facts we give people, they just ignore them. And they have whatever gives them positive feedback within their social group. That's what they do. People's brains work in a way where we make decisions first and then we justify them, and our memory is not able to sequence things correctly. So we believe that we made decisions based on our rationality, but if modern neuroscience is showing more and more that we actually don't. We actually make decisions based completely on emotion, and then we justify it with the narratives that are available to us within our own social world. So to address the problem, I mean, Bernays believed that there was kind of a basically free market of propaganda, and one person would have propaganda and then another person could counter it with different kinds of propaganda. And so we need to change our way that we communicate this. And this has been discussed a great deal in the climate community, working on vaccinations and things like that. We need to address the way that we communicate so that people have a feeling that this is what they want to do. And this is actually being done and working in some places. And I think that when we talk about the oceans, we can't ignore water on land as well. And many of the fish, for instance, salmon, spend much of their life in rivers. They swim up rivers, and then they spawn, and then they swim back down the rivers. Well, after they spawn, they die. But first, they go out into the oceans, and they swim around in the oceans and grow and eat for a long time. And we catch them and eat them. And in California right now, there's a kind of a battle that's going on, and Trump has taken one side of the battle, and the battle is that we don't have enough water. And so in California, we take about half our water and use it to keep the streams active. Well, the farmers hate that because they want to take the water and put it into their fruits and vegetables. California provides about half the fruits and vegetables for the United States. It's only a teeny part of our economy, but it's important nonetheless, obviously. And the value of the crops relative to the value of the for the farmers relative to the value of the water going into the ocean is abstract to them. But if we don't have the water going into the ocean, if we don't have the rivers flowing, then all of those fish can't reproduce. And some of the fish are almost extinct because of that reason. I talked to a guy, an environmental scientist, whose job was trying to convince farmers to use less water. And the way he did it was to basically let them know how it was valuable to them, like how it made a difference to them personally in their lives. And I thought to him, I said, well, you could never convince those farmers. And he said, no, that's not true. I've been able to do it. But we have to change it from being abstract to understanding that it's making, in some ways, the money that they need for people to pay for the fruits and vegetables and the people to be alive and have fish and things to eat. This can be, it's something we need to think about on a global scale, and it is working because everywhere, because as I said, the commons can either be regulated in some sort of way, which is impossible in the ocean because most of the ocean isn't owned by anybody, or the people can voluntarily work together to keep the commons and the fisheries alive and safe. And when we talk about putting boat GPS trackers on boats, or we talk about fishing in as a corporate greed, I think we're missing part of the point, because the truth of the matter is that poor Vietnamese fishermen got to the point of using these mile-long trawler nets, and they came over to the United States, and they don't have to put trackers on their boats. Who's going to make them? Not. I mean, who's the United States going to go over and force them to put trackers on their boats? I mean, and then you start looking. I don't know I didn't look up my computer's fan died last night, and somebody's going to come over and fix it today, but it made it harder for me to look stuff up. But I don't know what percentage of Bangladesh's protein comes from fish, but I would guess that it's high because of the fact that they're on the water. And overall, dams screw up the ability of fish to reproduce. And right now there's kind of almost a war brewing because Ethiopia is damming up the Nile. And that means that the water isn't going to go to Egypt, and they need the water to grow their food, and the water needs to be there to keep the fisheries alive as well. States can make agreements with each other, and that's being done in the Mediterranean because the fisheries in the Mediterranean are 95% gone. And we really need to work on it on different levels. Now, what does that mean for a developing country? I mean, developing countries, they want a sustainable way. I mean, the fishermen make money from it, the people eat from it. There's all these kinds of things that are just, they're going to touch their hearts. They're going to touch their emotions when they realize that their livelihood will be gone. There won't be any fish anymore. That's a pretty strong incentive for them to start doing something and protect their resources. They can protect them themselves, like the United States is doing, and many other countries, by having these sanctuaries, as Alex mentioned, where we have areas where you're not allowed to fish. The fish can just do whatever they want and have a happy life and not wind up on somebody's plate. One other thing that I want to mention that Dr. William mentioned is there was a study recently, really recently, and as I said, I can't point to it right now, but you can Google it and find it, that showed that farmed fish won't do it. We can't farm enough fish to feed everybody. We have to continue. We can't replace the fish that we're losing by farming fish. I don't know if we can augment it, and I'm sure that's it's going to be it is a valuable thing. I eat farmed fish, but overall, we have to convince people and get people to understand how it affects their livelihood. But again, we're always going to have these competitions because the fishermen and the farmers are, in some sense, kind of at war with each other, because the more water the farmers get, the more stuff they can grow, and then the more, and likewise, the fish will be healthier if the farmers don't take the water. And so Trump has sided with the farmers. There's some just awful politicians in California. One of the worst is a guy named Devin Nunes, and he represents the farmers, and his claim is that California has plenty of water, but we're wasting it because we're just letting it flow into the ocean. So that's one point of view, and it's actually a popular point of view in some places. I mean, the areas where there's farmers vote heavily for Trump because they're supporting that. So the tactic that the guy I was talking about, the environmental, is being able to go in and convince people that it's in their own benefit seems to me important. And it also seems to me that we have to use the psychological techniques of, and I say it in quotes, propaganda, mass influence, to be able to start getting people so that they have an emotional connection to the conflict and start siding with the fisheries to a larger degree. And that's that.
Okay, thank you, Professor Donald. Mr. Alex, I think that you have some data and some of the analysis you want to share with our audience. Yes.
But before he goes, Don, I think you're introducing a lot of noise. If you could mute when you're not talking, that would probably help everybody else, because I think it's your station that's introducing a lot of noise.
Oh, really? Okay, I don't have. There's no noise.
Tried. I was noticing everybody else was muted and the noise.
Okay. Alex?
Alex is muted. Alex, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, thank you, Rob. Yeah, I think that's where that noise was coming from Donald's channel. So going into some of my notes and some of the information, in having this conversation, it reminded me of a story. A couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I went to Europe, and I did travel through 11 European countries over 6 months, and I loved the way they all recycled, how they were concerned for the environment, they were knowledgeable of climate change. Going back to the recycling, it was interesting because in America, we just have a couple different forms of recycling. Here in California, they're not even really recycling. In Vegas, Alabama, Florida, and a lot of the East Coast. So in Norway and Sweden, a lot of the Scandinavian countries that I traveled through, they not only had, plastic and yard waste and trash, but they have a variety of, like a wide range of different areas to separate your recycling. So there's, the area for newspaper, for batteries, for cans, bottles, plastic containers, and there was trash and cardboard. So they have these all these sectioned off, which was nice. I actually had a chance to visit one of the waste to energy facilities, and it was just interesting how they burn the waste that's not recyclable, how they heat the homes and everything. So they just had a really good system that helped solve the pollution crisis there. So I did want to mention that when I was in that area, I did travel up to the Arctic Circle of Norway. It was during summer, but up in the Arctic Circle there was snow. It was snowing occasionally, and I went backpacking one time out to some glaciers by myself over 2 weeks, and it was really dangerous, and went on all these adventures in the Arctic Circle of Norway. It's beautiful, amazing opportunity. But I did, on top of networking with people, I met up with this man that had a team of people, and he owned a major nonprofit there, and he had a lot of government support, government funding. I remember his name, but I don't remember his website. So he so I went with him and a team of people. I think there was about 13 or 14 of us on his sailboat, and we didn't, just like when Greta Thunberg traveled across, I think, the Atlantic Ocean without using fossil fuels because she'd get criticized. We were actually on a sailboat, and we tried not to use the engine. So the majority of the trip out to these remote islands was with the sails and the wind, using wind power. So in Norway, there's 50,000 islands, and he goes out and he cleans these islands, and he does trash removal with teams and groups of people. And so we found, to get back to, out of 50,000 islands, we just went out really far, and then we just found this one island. It was hey, let's just go to that island. It looks like a good island, So we go to this island, and out of the 13 of us, and we took this little boat to get to this island. It was just uncomprehendable how much trash we got within 1 hour time period. I think it would probably fill up the back of a pickup truck about four times. Now, there was all kinds of buoys, and there was a fridge and all kinds of weird things that were out on this island, and we didn't even understand how it got washed up there. But you can tell there was no man-made trash. There's no single-use straws or cups or anything. It was all stuff that got washed onto the island. And the disturbing thing is 97% of all the trash on the entire island was just fishing equipment. So it was the buoys, the netting, anything related to the fishing industry. So that was interesting to see that. And from some of my internet research, even though we see a lot of, personally in our cities and, along our beaches, we're seeing the plastic containers, the water bottles, Coca-Cola, Nestle, the straws and the cigarette butts and all of that. And Gail can correct me if I'm wrong. If they added up all of the global pollution, from what I remember, it's the fishing industry that's causing more pollution, but I'm not privileged to those statistics and information at this time. I do want to say that, we talk about technology a lot through these video programs, and we are using technology to track pollution. And there's a lot of nonprofits and volunteers going out and using technology to gather pollution, to find pollution. So there's two different ways we could address this problem. Of course, there's the, getting to the root of the problem, which we're trying to find solutions. And thankfully, we are transitioning towards green products, more stuff that's biodegradable, made from recycled paper, made from bamboo, from hemp, natural products. Even these headphones that I bought that are made with hemp string and bamboo wood. This came in a package that was made from recycled material, and it was all FSC certified, which stands for Forest Stewardship Council. So it's just there's ways that we can vote with our money, but we're seeing a shift with products, with companies, with corporations, and we need to continue to see that shift. So when we see a company doing something bad PR will hopefully encourage them to transition. And then when we see them doing good things, write good reviews and give them positive support that they are doing the right thing. So getting to the root of the problem, is obviously one problem. There's a lot of ways to address that. Voting with our money, voting politically. There's a lot of solutions, but also, we have to do the cleanups, because every single time I pick up trash that's next to the gutter or next to the ocean, I always think that's that piece of trash. That's its last opportunity before it washes out to the ocean. I'm its last chance to stop it. So once we capture that and we either recycle it correctly or take it to the dump, it's going to potentially eliminate it harming the natural environment or animals. So I did also visit Florida during the red tide. When I actually did a 4 or 5 mile walk, and I documented it along the way. That's when all the animals, the sea life, were dying and washing up. You actually had to wear a mask, and it was burning your eyes from the red tide. And the beaches were closed, or recommended closed, and it was interesting. So again, this isn't what I study, but from what I remember, the green algae that was caused from pollution and Roundup and everything dumping in the water then washed out into Florida, and that caused a red tide. And even though there's natural red tides, when you use a whole bunch of synthetic fertilizers that are derived from fossil fuels, it just offsets the ecosystems, and a lot of animals died. I think that was about 2 years ago. It was a huge mass animal die-off, and those are happening around the world. We're also, if you even here, the San Lorenzo River, and it's really bad in Watsonville, where there's a huge agricultural community and they do use a lot of chemicals. All of those rivers are just really green, and I've been meaning to try to get my drone out there and fly it over some of these rivers to show you just all the algae that's growing. So it's just an unhealthy river. The rivers are sick. So that's something else that we have to address, because again, everything flows out into the ocean. Another thing that we're doing wrong is a lot of people are taking pharmaceuticals that they don't need to take. There's an opioid crisis in the United States. There's people taking all of these aspirins and Advils and Tylenol, all these things that they don't need. I think there is a point where we use pharmaceuticals to help solve something. Some people are dependent on them. I understand that. Antibiotics are a really good solution if someone's has an infection or on the verge of dying. So I don't know all the things about medications, but there are some that are important. But then there's a lot that we don't need to take. Regardless if you take them, you don't take them, they're necessary or they're not. There's too many people dumping them down their toilet, and it's going into the waterways, and it's disrupting ecosystems. All of the antidepressants that people don't take, even when you take it and it goes out through your urine and it goes back out into the streams, it is disrupting ecosystems. So we need to find more solutions with that. People don't know that I think here in California, I hope it's like this around the United States and other developed countries, you can actually take your prescription medication, you could take it to the pharmacy, and then they recycle it correctly. So it doesn't go into our waterways, it doesn't pollute the environment, and it doesn't affect natural ecosystems. So pharmaceuticals are causing huge problems around the world. So there's, I think, closed systems when it comes to water and water filtration and how people drink the water in a city or especially remote regions in the Middle East, because they don't have access to a lot of water. So when they filter the water, they can't always filter out chemicals and pharmaceuticals, even if they can filter out down to the micron level of viruses and bacteria. But chemicals and pharmaceuticals stay in the water. They're difficult to filter out unless you use desalination, because you can't do it with reverse osmosis and you can't do it with regular micron filters or anything. So radioactive waste is another huge problem. We saw this with the nuclear meltdown, Fukushima Daiichi in Japan. Now, radiation is a huge problem. We have like 144, probably at 150 nuclear reactors around the world that are at ocean level. And we need to start decommissioning those because they take 30 to 50 years to decommission before we start seeing more cyclonic activity in those hurricane-prone regions, and as we continue to see the ocean level rise and put some of those at risk. So radioactive material and radiation is another huge concern when it comes to ocean life and the damage that it can cause. And so we have all these solutions, and it's not just voting with our money, it's all of us just being more knowledgeable, more educated, and that's why we do these programs. That's why we ask our viewers to share this information, to take the individual initiative to research some of these solutions, because we're passing a lot of thresholds, tipping points, not just when it comes to climate change, but also when it comes to the ocean temperatures rising around the world, and ecosystems are collapsing around the world. And the ocean is there's a lot of major ecosystems and micro ecosystems in the ocean, and a lot of them are at risk. So we need to try harder. We're just not doing enough. There's that seafood watch that was I think or presented or organized or possibly put together by Monterey Bay Aquarium that I was referring to. So that's where you can eat sustainable seafood, and that's another link that I did post in the comment. So that's Seafood Watch.
Yeah.
So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Madam Gay, I think she wants to share some idea and some solution with our audience. The audience has many questions. I want to
thank you.
Take after your
Thank
discussion.
you. I'm deeply vested in attempting to create a just and sustainable shared future for all of our children. That is my goal, and in order to achieve that, I really think the main thing we need to do is start changing the way we tell the story. We need to bring a level of truth to the conversation that has frankly never existed. When we talk about, I think it was Donald or it might have been Rob talking about developing countries, for instance. How long are developing countries going to continue to be developing countries? At what point will we have the courage to say these are not developing countries? These are countries that have been abused by Western civilization, by greedy, profit-driven corporations for too long. I mean, that is the root of the problem. That is this idea that some people have the right to choose how others live everywhere in the world so that they can make a profit is the problem. I don't know if any of you watched Hassan Minhaj's show, Patriot Act, when it was on Netflix. Unfortunately, it's been canceled. But for instance, he had an episode on how the United States is making, I forget the exact title, but how the United States is making the world fat. Okay, so this is, the morals go beyond the abuse of the planet. We literally think we have the right to decide what is grown in countries all over the world so that some corporation can profit. I mean, I took a course this summer with Paul Ortiz, who wrote an African-American and Latinx history of the United States. Incredibly interesting to see how our history happened from a different perspective. What we are all taught is a white-centric, male-centric, capitalist-centric version of the world. And that version of the world is one that makes us comfortable in the way that we live. And in order to save the future, we have to become uncomfortable with the way that we live. And the idea of, for instance, depressants, antidepressants, washing into our water streams. Why do we need to take so many antidepressants? Why do we need all these drugs that we need? Because we're killing our mental health because we live in a disposable, mean world. And we're killing our physical health. I mean, we're all eating, drinking, and breathing about a credit card's worth of plastic a week. And the idea that we can fix any of these problems at the grocery store end, or even at the small municipality end, by changing what we recycle or what we do, that's ridiculous. There was an article just before the pandemic broke out. It was Plastic Planet, I think it was called, in Rolling Stone. And they were talking about how really the whole idea of recycling plastic is something that was created so that the plastic industry could produce more and more. The amount of plastic we've ever recycled is minuscule compared to the way they've ramped up production. And right now, the fossil fuel industry, as they see people moving away from fossil fuel-driven vehicles, is hedging their bets in plastic. And we're subsidizing them to destroy our world. I mean, this is a ridiculous time that we're living in. And we just need to wake up and realize that. And the idea that we can, in any way, shape, or form, transform our current lifestyles, our current culture into something sustainable is ridiculous because it involves not thinking things through. Like the idea of compostable utensils, for instance. What are those being made of? You know, they're being made of large monoculture crops, soy, whatever it is, being grown somewhere, using land that is going to be needed for food production to create things we're going to throw away, that in most cases can't even actually be composted because you need large facilities. It's not like you could throw that in your compost bin. I mean, so it's really just this idea of creating some myth that we can keep living the way we live as we destroy our children's future. And that's just not ethical. We, again, back to this moral compass, you know, we need to stop abusing, and we need to start loving. And we need to realize that we actually can create something beautiful if we can stop believing the lies.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. No, thank you. There are a few questions from audience. I want to take their questions, and then I want to go to Dr. William and all of our panelists, maybe give the answer. Ale Ahmed, her question is that what are the strategies set by the UN to prevent the sea level dangers? Mahadi Hassan, why the Ocean Week is necessary to protect our environment? There are more questions. I want to take 3 questions. How can we improve the life below water? Thank you. So Dr. William, and I think our whole panelists can discuss on different questions. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first off, once again, Gail, thank you for your contributions. You just left me speechless. And even though I was mute, I can tell you I had nothing to add because you did that so well. I'll start with the first question: why Ocean Week is necessary? I think Ocean Week the change in the message about how we're looking at the issues that are facing us, and to the extent that we have Earth Day, which is more of an umbrella thing to say, let's look at all the issues with the Earth. I mean, Ocean Week is just a byproduct of that, and it's necessary because each generation. I mean, we often think about it, and it's not necessarily creating the wheel over and over again, but with each new generation, the young kids coming up, generation after generation, they need to hear and learn from us. And to the extent that we don't pass that information on, then they will end up invariably making the same mistakes or misjudgments, or at least acting without informed an opinion. So in that regard, education and continuous education is clearly always something that's necessary. I want to take a moment and just talk about the UN's goals with regard to delaying or preventing sea level rising. The UN can't necessarily have goals. Actually, all the UN and all we can do is suggest a kind of a framework for how we're thinking about it. Because the only way to stop the rise of the sea level rising is to deal with climate change. And the only way we can begin to deal with climate change is a multi-front, multifaceted attack on all the problems dealing with climate change. And that's the increased emissions into the atmosphere. That's the kinds of energy that we're using. It is multinational, multilateral agreements to limit what it is that we're producing. I find it interesting also, on another program, I commented on the fact that, at least with regard to air pollution, one of the beneficial side effects of this COVID pandemic has been the cleaning up by nature of the air, simply because we stopped polluting. And there are any number of before and after pictures. What they find is that the same thing is true and has had the same impact with regard to marine life and life under the sea. And that is to say that the Earth has a natural way of healing itself if we were just to stop producing what we're producing. And what we had was a forced worldwide experiment during these last 12 to 18 months. And in that regard, there is hope. To say simply, we now know and we can now see. And so we really don't have to convince anybody. And we don't have to worry about, well, we do have to worry about them, but we don't really have to place that much emphasis on the climate deniers and the impact of human activity on our climate, which impacts the ozone layer, which impacts the melting of the polar ice caps, and then subsequently the rising of the sea. So it's an all interconnected issue. I once again am heartened by the notion that at the 50,000 foot or 100,000 foot level, we have to take a comprehensive look at the goals and the messaging. I'm particularly struck by the wisdom of this notion that says, hey, we are recycling we are creating products with the intention of them being recycled, which on the one hand makes us feel good, and yet at the same time doesn't attack the root cause of the problem, which is, do we actually need those items? Which is a fundamental shift in how we ought to be thinking about things. It's like, do I actually need 15 spatulas to flip a pancake? Or can I just use the pan like the great chefs do and see if I can, flip it myself? I mean, I might end up with a mess on the floor, but it seems to me that is the fundamental shift that we need to be thinking about, because Gail made it quite clear that it is absolutely ridiculous to think that, I'm going to intentionally buy a utensil that I may use once every blue moon and feel good about it because I know that at the end of the day, I'm just going to throw it away. Well, what is the point of that? And that is crazy, and that is absolutely astounding. So those are the two observations I can make with regard to those two questions. I defer to the rest of the panel. So.
Okay, Mr. Rob.
Well, I think we've heard about a lot of the problem. I mean, the Alex, I think, made my point expressly as he walked through all the things that are broken, and what an audience hears is it's impossible to fix. Everything's broken. The water's broken. The air's broken. The way we build stuff's broken. The way we dispose stuff's broken. And the thing is it's true. But when you hit somebody with all of that, all they say is, well, it's impossible. I can't do anything about it, so I'm not going to make any changes. And then everything just gets worse. I mean, take a look at how we teach kids in school. They go to cafeterias. They buy juice boxes, which are disposable. They get plastic utensils that are disposable. They have straws that are disposable. They have packaging that is disposable, but none of it biodegrades. You could certainly shift. When I started off in school, we didn't have any disposable stuff. Even the glass bottles were recyclable. At that time, when we completely changed from an ecosystem that, to a large extent, when I was young, just because of the economics of the time, was a reuse culture, and we shifted to a disposable culture, and the pollution, to a large extent, expanded from that particular time forward. Now, do be aware that there are advantages to disposable stuff. You don't have the germs don't spread from person to person as they do with reusable things. My mother died because of reuse, and so there are other reasons to use disposables, but somehow they don't seem to overwhelm the benefits of just simply not polluting the environment that you're living with. So my view is that you take one area, you make an initiative, you fix it, you start in schools with kids, so they're taught to reuse, and that they don't need to develop this or create this much trash in order to live. And then that carries through to follow-on generations. But my concern is if we continue to talk about the mass of this problem, then it simply becomes somebody else's to fix. It sounds so hopeless that who wants to make any progress? And I think to a large extent, that's kind of where we are now. We have people that believe passionately in terms of living a life that is very restricted, that is 100% reuse. And yet when you see those lives portrayed on TV, the one thing that comes through to me is I don't want to live like that. And I think to a large extent, because behaviors aren't changing, that's kind of how other people are concluding as well. We put the pain in front of the benefit, and then we wonder why people don't jump in and seemingly suicidally adopt these practices that don't seem to be personally beneficial at all, even though that's the way the world would probably survive. I mean, if we want to survive, to create a better world, we do have to sacrifice. On the other hand, there are initiatives coming forward from industry that hopefully will address a lot of this. The idea of a circular economy, that what you build, you reuse. It's a good idea, but now if you look at how a number of the companies are getting there, say, well, we're a circular economy, but what we're going to do is we're going to recover stuff that other people are doing to offset the damage that we're doing. That's not really fixing the problem. It just shifting it from one place to another. Or if you say, okay, well, we're going to recycle our own stuff. Yeah, but then what happens after that? You've delayed the introduction of this stuff into the landfills, but you haven't removed the introduction of the stuff into the landfills. My sustaining belief is we probably need to seriously start thinking, and maybe the pandemic will get us there, of going back or going to the idea of arcologies and creating contained, sustainable environments that are complete as they're built. As we're looking at these new cities of the future, that a number of people are bringing forward, like Bill Gates' City of the Future, which hopefully will be a showcase for recycling and doing things the right way. Start building things from scratch to be greener. Start building in behaviors from scratch that don't create the kinds of problems that we have today, and maybe go back to the way that things were a bit when I was young, and really think about reuse instead of disposal. But as long as we keep framing all these things as a series of massive efforts that everybody must do to live to live poorly, I just don't think we're going to get there. Sharif, you're muted again.
Professor Donald.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Well, I kind of wish, since most of our audience is in the developed world, that we had more input from the developed world. I doubt of the 50 million people or however many that are listening to this, any of them, only a teeny fraction of them, very teeny fraction, like a hundredth of a percent, have ever heard of Santa Cruz, Monterey, and they won't be able to access the wonderful cafeteria and fisheries at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And we've been talking a lot about the whole thing from the perspective of the United States, but what I'm thinking of is that the Vietnamese trawlers sail across the ocean and fish right next to the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. It's actually gotten to be a problem that we've had to address. And they're poor people who may not even have television sets, that are trying to earn a living for themselves and their families. And when we get to a place like Bangladesh, which you know a great deal about, Sharish, I'm kind of asking the question is how much can we reach people? I know this show is a great way of reaching people, and that's what the point is to educate people about these things. We need to, if you try and have a top-down situation, then you wind up having an autocratic government, which is extremely dangerous, because if somebody gets in control of an autocratic government, like we almost had happen here with Trump, they can create problems like wars and all kinds of bad stuff. They steal everything from the country. And Malaysia has a very good centralized government, and China is addressing pollution quite a bit. And one of the reasons that they're addressing their pollution there is because the people were so unhappy. I mean, it was killing them. You die in Beijing from the bad air, and people were getting pretty upset about that. But on the other hand, they're kind of careless by damming, like the Three Gorge Dam and the various kinds of things that they're doing. I wonder if you could spend just a little bit of time talking about these kinds of changes from your perspective, Sharif, as a person that lives in the developed world. I'm curious how people get the information that they need to make the changes, and how it would be in a democratic society that people would be able to create the kind of changes. And I will say that I'm going to throw this in is I'm a big proponent of entrepreneurship. And I always say that a company is created to solve a problem. And so I would really like to know how this could happen in a democratic society, how we could start making these changes that are really seem top down.
Okay, no, this is actually good things. One point I just want to share with you example of I want to share example country like Bangladesh, India, even in Pakistan, Indonesia, even Malaysia, they have a good democratic system in their own way. That is the reality. And I don't know, maybe after 10 years, 20 years, what will be the definition of democracy? But what I observe, example, country like Bangladesh, we have our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Last 12 years of time, if you see that we have very good development in economics and other aspects. And beside that, I observed that actually this kind of country, government, okay, definitely important, but different kind of entrepreneurs. I think that you observe Mr. Sobur Khan or Mr. Bashars and different kind of big entrepreneurs. They are actually solving, like much people actually solving many problems. Like this is the things like they cannot depend too much on government, that government will take initiative and then they will solve the problem. Most of the cases, the ecosystem actually grow through the entrepreneur. So I understand your point. This is very important. And definitely, beside the entrepreneurships, I always said that innovations, proper innovation and research. I think we need to develop more in research area and innovation area. And beside that, even though some of the scientists in Bangladesh, they are trying to innovate vaccine. Maybe they will not successful, but they are taking initiative. That is important. Same thing happened in Malaysia, same thing happened in Indonesia, same thing happened in Vietnam. Many of the entrepreneurs actually solving problems. So this is the things I'm very honest with you. I do not find that sustainability and this kind of things actually media and government do not give them too much of priority. So that's why World Talent Economy Forums, we are giving its priority because we believe that COVID is a big issue. Right now, we are solving the COVID. Beside that, the developing nations, they will heavily affected by the global warming issues. Example, even you are talking about Bangladesh. Bangladesh will lose their 20% of land. Millions of people actually lose their lives. So what will happen? So that is the initiative. Maybe it will happen after 5 years. But I'm taking some initiative with the help of the expert like you, Gail, Dr. William, Professor Donald, Mr. I'm trying to create awareness. Now, example, this kind of countries, they are different business forum, they are intellectual forum. Then now they are sharing our content. Besides that, they are asking me, can you give me a speech of 1 hour of time on that particular issues because we want to understand more. So that is the things that we are developing some sort of awareness and awareness building campaign. But after World Talent Economy Forum, we are taking initiative. Now they are concerning, they are thinking that, okay, we can do something. That is the progressions. Maybe I have very limited resources, but I can reach many youth community, many young community, many corporations, even governments. So that is the initiative we are taking. And definitely we have to create better ecosystem. We need more collaboration, more transparent relationship with developed world as much as possible. I believe that is the ultimately the beauty of globalizations. So if we can create better ecosystem with different corporation, research centers, we take different kind of initiative, that is the way of solving. And I'm sure that audience, those who are joining, those who are sharing, those who are discussing, like last 1 year, actually many organizations, they are involved with us and they are discussing, okay, let's do something on sustainability. So but before that, I'm very honest with you, we do not have too much of initiative, but now people, day by day, they are involving with us. Every day I'm getting at least 10 university, those who have at least 10,000 to 100,000 students, they are joining. They said, okay, how can we distribute these things? So that is ultimately our objective. Our objective is that at least we create awareness, we create some sort of solutions, and maybe many of the talented people is everywhere. We can communicate with the talented people, and with the help of our intellectual community, like those who are attend in World Talent Economy Forum as a speakers, as a in our scientific committee, in as advisory board, they will help us. They will help our youth community to solve the problem. That is the bottom line. But scenario is that we have to go long way. We have to go long way. No choice, because our people is not too much of aware of these things. This is reality, and there is a, I want to say, millions and million people, they do not have clear understanding about these things. And I'm sure at least your 1 hour, 2 hours of time, it changed millions of lives. At least they can think differently. Yes. So, Mr. Alex, I'm sure that you have many data and informations. Even Ma'am Gail, you can share with your like website and information with our audience, and I'm sure that it will be very helpful for us.
Yes, I'll go ahead and just thank Gail again for coming on the show. She provided a lot of good information. Listening to her as a speaker is really wonderful. Not only do we get facts and statistics and solutions, but she also kind of talks about it from her personal perspective and inspires us. So that's it's really wonderful. She's doing really great work. So Gail, I believe, lives in Santa Cruz, still in Santa Cruz, and Donald. So us three down here on the lower part of the screen, we all live in Santa Cruz, which is next to Silicon Valley and in the Monterey Bay. So Save Our Shores, the nonprofit that I believe she still works for, they focus on ocean cleanup, and it is right out here in the Monterey Bay, and it is a protected area, sanctuary, so there's no drilling and stuff in the Monterey Bay. So this is a website that I created. This was a project. This project is like, this is a form of activism. So I designed these stickers because right now, when we buy something, we see if it's organic, if it's vegan, if it's, you see a little rabbit, if it was cruelty free. And this, I wanted to put this logo on all products. So if you go to the very top, I designed this logo. It's that little black and white sticker. It's a circular sticker. Now, it talks about, please do not buy this product because it contains excessive plastic packaging. Now, this is a project I started 2 years ago. I actually ordered like 16,050 of those stickers. That's actually like 2 massive boxes of just those. And I passed out all of them to people coming through my community here in Santa Cruz. UCSC students, tourists, family, friends. I mailed them out to people. So the goal of this sticker is you go into a store and you take this sticker and you stick it on all the potato chip bags where there's this much potato chips and this much air. All of the companies using excessive plastic packaging techniques to sell their product and just profit. So these stickers, borderline illegal. You can't do this anymore because we're in a pandemic, so no one should be touching anyone else's food. But this sticker is made out of paper, and I actually paid extra money, so it's super sticky adhesive. You can't really take it off. So this helps raise awareness, not only when the consumer is looking around shopping, they pick it up and like, wait, I don't want to buy this. That's right. I want to buy this over here. Those little seaweed sushi snacks? That's 54% plastic in those little seaweed snacks. 54% plastic. You only get 46% seaweed. So we're actually, for every 100 pounds of seaweed people consume, that's a lot, that's over 100 pounds of plastic going into landfills, not being recycled, going into the environment. So these stickers, this was one of my creative ideas. Eventually, it would be nice if a company would be like, hey, like if I was an organization or my organization, or I want anybody to do this, anyone could take this idea and do this. And then the company contacts that organization with that sticker and says, hey, we're only using 5% packaging. It's biodegradable. Can we put your other logo that says this is sustainably packaged? And then when I'm in the store or the average consumer is looking at products, they see, oh, this has been approved by this organization, because right now we're buying stuff for the USDA certified and all these different little logos that you see, vegan and non-processed and the non-GMO project. So this is another huge thing that we could do to help solve the crisis. This is, again, something I did a few years ago. It shows how you could actually order these stickers on your own. I was giving huge stacks to stores and they were passing them out for free. Down at the bottom, there's some additional tips and suggestions on this website regarding how to purchase as little packaging as possible. That might be buying in bulk, going to Costco, and then not wasting food is another huge thing that we have to address, because that would help solve a lot of the pollution around the world. Wasting food. So like if we all chose to not eat fish because we know that our oceans are overfished, then we're going to eat more vegetables and we use more land and potentially more chemicals and more fertilizers. So altogether, I think we've talked about obesity. We've obviously, we're in America where there's just consumerism and greed and gluttony. We waste so much food in America. It's not just the companies and the corporations and the restaurants. It's also the individual consumer that just wastes food. I'm fortunate that I have multiple organically raised free-range chickens, so I can feed my vegetable scraps to them where I live, and if not, I'll compost what I don't eat and I'll grow more food with it. But not everyone has access to that. But again, we just need to be cautious about how much food we're purchasing each time, buying things that we will eat, that we enjoy, and just choosing to eat our leftovers before we eat brand new food. So I don't know if I mentioned the statistic, but right now 9% of recyclables around the world are recycled. So what Gail was mentioning, a lot of people don't know this. There's all this, it's like greenwashing. So all these stores are selling stuff that says compostable fork, plastic, compostable or whatever. So that's an industrial composting machine, and we don't even have that here in the city of Santa Cruz. That's where the temperature of the machine reaches certain temperature threshold, and it composts these basically synthetic plastic type, whatever they're made out of. But you can't just throw it in your compost at home. So it's a form of greenwashing. It is like a small step in the right direction, but it's not enough. And we're just doing too little, too late, like Gail mentioned. And for developing countries, there's a lot of opportunities when it comes towards creating reusable cutlery. And right now, we should all have our reusable straw, our reusable coffee container, our reusable water container, our to-go container, our fork. I even have my reusable napkins container. So even if we do a couple of those things, it's helping us use less single-use plastics. So there's a lot of alternatives to plastic. There's hemp, there's bamboo. We're doing more stuff with mushroom, recycled paper. So just being knowledgeable of all of those, and every time we're in the store, just trying to vote with our money, and like these headphones and the packaging that was in this headphone. So all of that gives more money to the companies that we should be supporting. So then they're able to expand and continue to produce good products. One thing that I'm just throwing this out there. Hopefully it reaches people. Tire alignment is also important, because when your tires are misaligned, it wears your tires down faster. And if everybody had their tires aligned, tires last longer, and all of the particulates from the tires don't go onto the road and then wash into the waterways, because there's a lot of toxic stuff in tires, car tires. They're horrible. So just making sure your tires aligned. I am not vegan or vegetarian, but I have a very, very huge percentage of my diet is vegan and vegetarian. So I try to vote with my money the best like that. And then I do want to say that, like Gail was saying, we're just really out of balance, and we're doing too little, too late. There's a lot of stuff that we have to change. The problem is systemic throughout our society. And like William mentioned in the last program, how we got to increase by a certain percentage. We got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time, because we're seeing so much environmental destruction, devastation, more climate-related disasters. Animals are suffering and dying from the pollution that we caused. The single-use plastic. It's like I've been to airports in the past traveling where you see people just take a couple bites out of those little salads, and then they just the waste is just disgusting. And it makes me embarrassed to be a human, that we're on this planet, that we live in such a beautiful world with so much nature and just animals and just all the innocence before mankind just came and basically destroyed everything. So I'm just trying my best to vote with my money and live a good life and do the best that I can. But education's a big part of that, and these programs are a big part of that. And just doing, if you have access to the internet, just keyword searches, learn what you can, and try to apply it to your life, and try to educate other people. And again, I'm happy to be on the show, and feel free to message me if you have any questions, and hopefully you can get in contact with some of these panelists, because we got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Madam Gail, my questions to you that how we can develop better policy for solve this kind of things, how we can create better ecosystems, like specifically if we can want to develop it in Asia Pacific area. So what's your observations and how you want to share your experience?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me this morning, Sharif. This has been a great conversation, and I've really enjoyed being part of it. And Alex, thanks for reaching out. Well, first of all, I agree that we need entrepreneurship right now, and creativity is absolutely a key piece of what we need in this moment, because quite frankly, we're doing most things wrong. And if we believe that, creativity got us into this mess, hopefully creativity can get us out of this mess. And in truth, the level of wrongness really is only since World War II. It's not like it's not a tremendous amount of time. I mean, we have plenty of people alive today who remember living differently. And truth is, my mom, when she talks about the Great Depression, doesn't remember the challenges so much as she remembers her family, all, extended family living under one roof, and all these sort of beautiful memories. It's like challenges can lead to good things. And I think that's part of what we're experiencing with COVID right now. I mean, yes, we've seen pollution go down, but we've also seen the disparities, right? We've seen how some communities that have been abused for too long, many of them Black, Indigenous, people of color, places where we've located our factories, these places that already are suffering from the health impacts of the problems of our capitalist system. Those people are being disproportionately impacted. And honestly, I don't think that any innovation or any entrepreneur is going to save us. And I think that's actually a very dangerous place to think. While we need those things, where I find my hope is honestly with the farmers in the streets in India right now, with the movement for Black Lives that took over this summer, with Standing Rock, with the protests against Line 3. I mean, it is the people who are out there when they can be out there safely on the internet protesting in any way that they can. It is the people, because we do need to change the government. We're not going to win. We can't get through this without changing the government, but the government is never changed from within. And the government won't be changed by corporations that have a greed motive, right? The government will be changed when we push them to change. And the perfect example of that is Biden's cabinet, right? We saw so many disappointments. We talked a lot about agriculture today. Tom Vilsack as Secretary of Agriculture is not a good thing. That is not going to help us. He is being driven in the wrong direction by greed, and that is not helpful. But Deb Haaland as Secretary of the Interior, a Native American woman from New Mexico, from a community that's been decimated by uranium mining, as Secretary of the Interior is huge. I mean, that is hope. And that didn't happen because somebody paid for Biden's campaign. That happened because Biden felt the pressure of the people who actually elected him, not because they necessarily wanted Biden. And it's honestly, it's not about just getting rid of Trump. I mean, getting rid of Trump is very important, but getting rid of Trump doesn't get rid of Trumpism. It doesn't get rid of the autocracy that's happening, not just in the United States, but all over the world, because of what has happened to people. When people are desperate, bad things happen, and we have to stop designing for poverty. We have to stop assuming that it's okay for some people to live in desperation in our refuse and we have to do better, and we can do it. It's honestly, again, I believe it's really about telling the story in a way that people can see a future they want to live in. The future that we need to build isn't austere, it's beautiful. It's a future where we don't feel disposable, where we don't need antidepressants, where our bodies aren't being decimated as much as our planet. You know, we I don't know, we can do it, I believe. So thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. William. So how do you want to add like your points today, because you have some different political point of views, and you are expert on policy making? Yeah, Dr. William.
You're muted.
Yeah.
I'm heartened by what Gail just mentioned, and that causes me to kind of dig deep into a bit of my history, and that was during the 04 election cycle. I was the deputy state director for Washington State for Howard Dean. And as you recall, our rallying cry then, obviously I was much younger, 15 years or so, was that we represent the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. Now, of course, centrists in the Democratic Party at that time thought that we were foolish. And at that time, we were talking about weaning ourselves off of foreign oil, health care, universal health care, and any number of other issues that the rest of the world, pointed a finger at and called us crazy for. So on the one, I cite that for two reasons. First, it's that progressives we've been around for a long, long time, and we are making progress. And oftentimes, we start off with this hopeful dream, and we're absolutely right that it does take people, but it also takes time and people and a consistent effort over time, so that as we rise through the ranks and then get into a position where we can finally see the realization of these things. So when you talk about the appointment, the Interior Department, you're right. That's absolutely amazing. And you're right. There may be some concerns about Bill Sack. There may be some concerns about other appointees, but I can tell you this, we're a lot farther than we were when, 15 years ago. And so now, you've got the Bernie Kratz, which I think is cool. You've got the AOC people camp. And frankly, if I was back out on the campaign trail in the future, which I expect to be at some point in time, I'm going to be with AOC. But the point here is, and I want to pick this up, that Gail, you're absolutely right. Our future is a beautiful future, and it doesn't have to be austere. And Rob, you're right that we don't have to just pile on with all of the problems such that it becomes an insurmountable mountain. We do have people that climb mountains, but we don't have to do that in order to find a solution. It can be piece by piece. Alex, I find you absolutely incredible that you are going to go into the food stores and surreptitiously attach stickers from unknown origins. But that's just another form of activism. And that's kind of affirmative thinking that we need and that I believe in. And, whether it's farm-raised fisheries across the globe, each doing its part. And I've said this before, inch by inch, piece by piece, percentage by percentage, we will get there. It is changing the culture, changing the message to say that it has to be more compass-based, morally compass-based, and that we are in fact, at an inflection point. So I can just tell you this, I'm heartened by all of it. I think that the more that we're hopeful, the more that we're optimistic, and the more that we say, that get that message out, that it says two things. One, it's going to take some work. And yeah, it may be 15 years or so, because I have never moved past being a Deaniac and, representing the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, or the Democratic wing of the Democratic Party. And so in that regard, Sharif, to the extent that we reach any of them, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, and particularly the young students who are going to be the thought leaders, currently in an increasingly interconnected world where information spreads faster and cooperation spreads faster, as Rob pointed out, with the remote collaboration having been accelerated during the time of COVID, my hopes and beliefs and aspirations are that we are going to see change, and that this time around change is going to happen faster, because we're in a 24-hour cycle in a faster world at a blink of an eye. And the faster that we can make these connections, the faster we can pursue all of the ideas. I had said it the other day, all ideas are on the table. It's time to put them all on the table in whatever areas that we have so that we can get there. And I, for one, will take it inch by inch, yard by yard, group by group. I will, bust up what we need to bust up and strengthen those things that have proven successful. But it is hopeful because we have so many concerned people out there. And to the young people that are watching, one day you're going to be in charge. It may be sooner, it may be later. You never know how your impact is. What you do and what you're going to say is going to have an impact or reverberate around the world, given the technology that we have. And so I say, get after it while you're young, energetic, and hopeful, so that you guys can turn around and start lecturing older people like me and say, see, we succeeded where you failed. And I'll just sit back and smile and I say, right on, right on. So with that, don't mind me. We will get after this every day, every hour, every moment, inch by inch. And I know that we are going to be, because I just can't, Sharif.
Thank you, Dr. William. Mr. Rob.
Well, it's been an interesting discussion. I still think it comes back to when you're talking to a large audience like this, what you can do to help the overall process. And here is certainly changing your own behavior. Watch what you're creating, watch what you're disposing, watch what you're throwing out. When possible, reuse. Stainless steel straws aren't that difficult to get hold of, and you can carry them with you. And at least it keeps one level of plastic out of the landfill. And if you can avoid it, bottled water, not a good idea, because those damn bottles are really hard to get rid of. If you go to almost any tropical island, you'll see beaches covered now with if they're not cleaning them up, beaches covered. I was in Belize, and it was like walking down walking down the beach was like walking down the front end of a landfill. So the more that you can do in terms of your behavior to stop creating more pollution, the better off you're going to be. Also look, when you're voting for politicians, look for those that live and believe the way that they speak. A lot of folks that run for office are really green in their rhetoric, but not really green in their lifestyle, and kind of watching for people that walk the talk and behave the way that they want others to behave. This idea of continually to preach to others how they should behave just hasn't been working all that well. So lead by example, not by fiat. And then finally, take a look at all the things around you. Know what the labels mean. If you're going to buy organic, find the label. The USDA organic is relatively reliable. Certainly use that designation when you're buying food. Mostly not so much because it's greener, but because it's probably going to be more healthy. Do yourself a favor. And then I think finally, if we look at some of the behavior that you have that causes extreme problems, a massive consumption of power, massive driving, eating beef, things that cause an awful lot of the pollution that's out there. If you can change that behavior just a little bit, then you're making a positive impact, and you're leading by example. So just recognize people, watch what it is you do and say, the right things whenever possible, and everybody stay safe out there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor Donald.
Hi there. Well, I feel like we've been talking a lot to people that aren't really listening. I mean, that aren't in our audience. Buying USDA organic is not all that possible for somebody that's living in India or Bangladesh or the places where the people are listening to us. It might be a reasonable idea to promote things like that, to make those things available. And that's an example of where the idea of entrepreneurship comes in. That's an opportunity. That's a way, something that somebody can do to create new behaviors, new ways of doing it. I mean, somebody doesn't really have enough to eat. Telling them that they need to, and huge food insecurity, telling them that they need to do this or that thing that we do in, the wealthiest one of the wealthiest parts of the wealthiest nation on earth, it doesn't really, there's no connection really. They're not that's, I want to point out that that Tesla, for an instance, is the person is the place that's been driving our change to electric cars. So not all corporations and everything corporations do is necessarily bad. And the vast majority of businesses aren't corporations. Corporation is just a legal thing that allows people to invest in the business in the United States and some other developed countries. Businesses aren't evil. They've been around since the dawn of man. And there's been some great innovations that are valuable to everyone, but from entrepreneurs. For instance, the M-Pesa in Kenya Kenya pioneered electronic money. They were doing it before the United States. And where I'm going with that is that, as I said, I lived in Finland, and I actually worked helping Finnish businesses try and expand their market into the United States. And I'm actually working now with some Japanese businessmen about the cultural differences. And one of the businesses was sensors, really, really low cost sensors that you can put in lakes that detect any change in the chemical structure of the lake. And that's because the Finns consider their lakes precious. And one of the things that I think Gail said, my memory, was that talking about being in nature. And most Finns had a sauna, but I wouldn't say that every Finn had a sauna or access to a sauna. But the one thing that I'm pretty sure of is that every single solitary Finn goes up to the north to their summer cabins in the Arctic Circle and communes with nature. The Finns are extremely into their natural environment. Cities are less polluting than they use less energy than people who live in suburbs. So there's a kind of a tug of war between being better for the environment and being more disconnected from nature. So I think that being more connected to nature and being more aware of the areas around you is good. I mean, I know it's good. It's healthy. I know it's healthy. There's been lots of research about that. So that provides another opportunity for entrepreneurs. There's been now greenscaping on roofs. There's been all these different kinds of ways for cities to have more green areas and more possibility, which reduces pollution, it reduces carbon dioxide pollution, and is better for people's heads. It makes people calmer and less stressed. So all of the things that we've been talking about are really opportunities, and I don't.
Yes. I think Madam Gail, if you want to share something, I think he has internet problem. Oh.
Yeah, just some of what Donald brought up has me thinking about a few sort of closing thoughts. First of all, it's sort of like a big level. I think this is an example of what we're doing here in this moment of the possibility for global communication and really forming new connections, not just at the government level, but between people like we've never had before. This is beautiful. And it is one of the upsides, one of the lessons we, I think, have learned during the COVID situation. At the same time, as a mother, I'm aware of what's happening to our children. And Donald, you talked about being in nature. I mean, we've heard of nature deficit syndrome and also the inequities that come up. I mean, we're at this moment in time when we need to create a much more equitable world than we've ever had, and yet we risk moving in the wrong direction. Because, for instance, as you know, digital out of necessity, digital schooling has come to rise. We know that not all families are able to access that, even when we give them laptops. and that type of thing. So we need to be very careful in that realm. And really, I think we need to recognize the potential of this global communication and the need to shift our economies toward local. So, and as part of that, we really honestly, I believe, need reparations for the global South. I mean, we need to help abused countries, and abused cities and abused places and indigenous communities that have lost their land and their water. We need to help all of these places start nurturing and growing regenerative agriculture and regenerative aquaculture. We need to get beyond this whole idea that anything about the industrial economy that we've built, the industrial global economy, and particularly industrial agriculture, is sustainable or humanitarian, because it's not. I mean, it's all profit driven. It's ridiculous. Not only are we destroying our land, destroying our water, the idea that we can ship things all over the world, and sell our goods to people is ridiculous. We need to regenerate communities all over the world. I mean, and that is part of our future happiness as much as anything else. It's time to get over this idea that some nations need to be completely dependent on others, and it's doable. It's just going to take the people seeing it, believing it, and demanding it. And we don't actually have a choice, because the alternative is shifting the furniture on the Titanic. And we need to stop doing that.
Okay, thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks for today. Before that, I just want to add World Talent Economy Forum, Asia Research and Development Institute, and Al-Noor Academy. We are working together. We are not only go for the policy level discussion and do some research. We are taking more initiative in the real world, like how we can develop more green energy, how we can develop more smart village, how we can develop more sustainable cities, and this initiative. So we need more of the support from the global community. We need more intellectual people like you, those who can contribute in World Talent Economy Forums, as well as we are sharing all of your content with the huge amount of youth community, those who are studying in universities and college level, because youth are the futures. We believe that they can change the world. Even in Asia Pacific, 50 to 57% actually youth, million people actually youth. They are the future. So if we can change them, maybe we can change our ecosystem in an effective way. Beside that, different governments and different think tank and policy level people, they are also supporting us. So tomorrow we have very interesting discussions, sustainable cities. From Asia Pacific country like India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, many of the governments and the policymakers, they think that we have to go for sustainable village, not smart city. We have to go for a smart village. So this is the reality. Even in the COVID-19 people, millions of the people, they leave Mumbai, they leave the main city, and they are going back to the village. So this is the different aspects. So tomorrow we're going to discuss on that particular points. I request all of the panelists, if you have time, so you can join the tomorrow's discussion. Beside that, from Swiss Impact Investment President, because he has good understanding about India and this local ecosystem, we also invite him. He will join with us, Mr. Ben Banerjee, and I want to invite today's panelists as well. Hopefully it will be very, very interesting discussions, and I'm sure because how all of the strategy changing in the COVID-19 situation. This is fact. Millions people, those who live in the main city, now they are living, they're going to village. So how we can develop a sustainable ecosystem for them, because actually the developing nations, they are very much centric in a capitals. They are not decentralized. Yes, Malaysia is a decentralized country, but we are trying to develop this decentralized policy with the planning ministry, even different countries' prime minister office. So I'm sure tomorrow's session will be more informative and more helpful for the local ecosystems and for the global community. So Mr. Alex, I want to start the concluding remarks with Mr. Alex, and then Dr. William, Robs, Professor Donald, and finally today's our new guest, she can go for the concluding remarks.
Unmute my mic. Okay, so with some of my concluding remarks, I do want to recommend Seafood Watch. It looks like it's in some sort of collaboration with the Monterey Bay Aquarium, approximately 35 miles from where I'm located. The Monterey Bay Aquarium is an educational facility that has a lot of sea creatures and aquatic life and everything. It's really cool. They also have a website. They're broadcasting through some live videos, and it's just a lot of educational material. If you go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium website, they help protect the Monterey Bay and raise awareness of all that. So I do want to recommend going to Seafood Watch so we can vote with our money. And here in America, I'm not sure how far the reach is of Seafood Watch, but I know that it gives us that option here. We didn't talk about the correlation between increase in ocean temperatures, ocean acidity, and the impact of phytoplankton and zooplankton, and how detrimental it is if we lose those in our ocean. So maybe we can save that for a later conversation. But there's a lot of connection when it comes to ocean acidification and zooplankton and phytoplankton, and how that's connected with the overall ecosystems, the ocean's ecosystems. So I do want to mention, without negatively projecting anything towards these countries, there's some countries that are polluting more when it comes to the plastic waste problem than others. Now, again, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I see some of these sources in Science Mag and statistics charts and everything. So we've learned a little bit about this in environmental science in school. These could have changed places, but right now it says China is the leading in ocean pollution. They're polluting the most. And then there's Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Egypt. So it goes down. So just knowing which country is the most polluting and how to potentially solve that and address that. So if we don't know the problem or where the problem is, it's hard to get to the solution. If we know where the problem is, then we can start directing solutions towards those. We also didn't talk about, there's a lot of nonprofits around the world that are doing really great things for the ocean, such as Save Our Shores, which I also posted the link in the comment section. I hope some of the viewers can check out Save Our Shores. I've donated to Save Our Shores on different payment plans, and I support them through donating, through sharing their content, collaboration, and any way that I can. So I encourage other people to donate to the nonprofits making a difference to help save the ocean, protect the ocean, conservation. And there's also a lot of volunteer opportunities and potential job opportunities. If you want to go into that career, there's going to be a lot of opportunities. So I wanted to mention the food in Europe. When I was there traveling through Europe, I would ask a lot of people, like, where could I get organic food? And I guess there's not really organic food in Europe. They just trust the food more. I mean, just all the food's generally like just better and healthier. So organic's not a big thing in the countries that I visited in Europe, because I guess they're just using less chemical fertilizers and synthetic everything to grow their food. So that was good to see that, and then to know that. And I think there's Roundup and certain GMOs banned in Russia or Germany. I don't know. Different countries have different laws and protections in place for that. So Gail mentioned shopping local. I try my best to go to farmers market as often as possible, buy local and support local businesses. That helps us become less dependent on the global food transportation system. So we're not buying food from around the world. Also, buying food that's in season is very important. And this helps us become more resilient for disasters in the future if we buy local and shop local. So I didn't mention in Europe, they have those vending machines that you can go and actually put your container in, and you get like 25 cents back because you initially spent 25 cents to get that container. So they have those automated vending machines that accept your recycling. We don't have that here. We only pay 5 cents, for that recycling fee for most containers, or 10 cents for bottles. And if we increased that, it would give more incentive for people to hang on to their recyclables and turn them into those machines or get their money back. So I think that a huge solution would be to increase that 5 or 10 cent fee to 25 cents, 30 30 cents. So then people hang on to their containers. It's more likely to be recycled. I think that would be a huge solution. And I do want to mention that 100%, maybe 99.9% of every single man-made product and everything that we've ever invented and ever created is eventually going to go back into the atmosphere or the environment on a long enough timeline. This is excluding space exploration equipment and satellites and anything that we're sending out in space. But aside from all of that, everything that we've ever created is eventually going to decompose. It doesn't matter if it's a compostable cup or a stainless steel straw. Eventually things are going to change their form on a long enough timeline. So when we keep creating all of these horrible products that we dump into the atmosphere, dump into the environment, eventually it's going to wash back down out into the ocean, or it's going to be buried in land, but eventually it's going to affect us, the animals in the environment and natural ecosystems. So just try your best to vote with your money and learn everything that you can, because we have a lot to lose if we keep failing like we have.
Thank you, Mr. Alex.
Thank you.
William. Yes.
Listen, I as you know, I love being on this program. I've loved today's discussion. I've learned so much. I would simply say to those that are listening out there, keep at it with the ideas, and think outside of the box. You know, this thought keeps occurring to me over and over again. That oftentimes some people, they say that listen, we ought to approach the problem based on historical evidence and studies and things of that nature. But by its very definition, innovation is the creation of something that didn't exist before. And we've got some serious problems. And it begins with how we think about things, how the framework for our society, the framework for our understanding, whether or not we can have our cake and eat it too, whether or not we actually even need it, those essential items. And so I guess the question is, at least for me, is that as long as we have an optimistic faith that tomorrow can be better, and we take our step by steps, along with what Rod said, first look at what we can do locally in our environment, look around us. Then next, when we start to seek out and supporting organizations, make sure the organizations walk the walk instead of just talking the talk. Same true is a standard for those of our elected leaders, whether our local leaders, state leaders, or national leaders. And then, as Alex points out, a little bit of activism, or maybe a lot of activism as we move forward. Because at the end of the day, we have to change our actions, change minds along with our actions, and then put together a coalition of the willing. And so these are important. And to those that are watching, let's keep at it. And get into a scuffle with your friends over economic theory from time to time. I mean, mix it up, see what happens. But
okay, thank you, Mr. Rob.
Sharif?
Well, sometimes these things can look pretty hopeless when you aggregate stuff like we did, and just recognize that you can make a difference. You can make a difference in how you live. You can make a difference on who you contribute to. You can make a difference on who you support politically. And you can make a difference by how you talk about this subject. We are polluting the planet at an increasingly troubling rate, and the less you can do to help that bad process, and the more you can do to make the planet better, the better off we all are. So keep hope. It sometimes looks hopeless, but a lot of folks are out there busting their butts to make the world a better place. Join them if you can, but at the very least, don't make things worse. And once again, stay safe.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Donald.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Well, one of the things that's valuable about looking at things that are being done in the United States would be as a way to find opportunities. So somebody can look at the website of Save Our Shores, or they can look at the Monterey Aquarium and get an idea of what people are doing in the rest of the world. Obviously, since very few people in our audience are in the United States, they won't have the ability to go to the Monterey Aquarium. They probably don't even know where Monterey is. The Monterey Bay, incidentally, is a beautiful bay that's about 70 miles south of San Francisco. For those of you who don't know, which is most of you. As I said before, problems are opportunities. Just saying that we shouldn't have we shouldn't depend on each other. We're not really depending on each other. We're interdependent. When I lived in Finland, if I wanted to eat vegetables during the winter, they had to come from Southern Europe. There were no vegetables. How could they grow them? It's pitch black. Vegetables require photosynthesis to grow. What's the developing world going to do right now about COVID vaccines? I mean, it's true that, as you said, I thought that was fascinating that they're trying to develop COVID vaccines in Bangladesh, but it's pretty unlikely that they'll be able to do it in a reasonable amount of time. It's actually the interdependence that we have with each other is a wonderful thing, and ultimately the problem is the nationalism, where people are saying that this belongs to my country and you're not allowed to have it, like some of the talk about vaccines that comes out of our government is nationalistic. All of the things that we've talked about are all potentials for people to be able to make a difference by providing the things that are needed. They're not going to come out of thin air. They have to come from someone. And human beings they have social structure. You can see it really quickly. There's status in human beings. The founder of improv, Keith Johnstone, said that every human transaction, there's a status component to it. And people want to be higher status. They look at something, they look at the United States, they look at the kind of lifestyle that people live from everywhere in the world. And it's kind of difficult to say to them, well, you're not allowed to have it. Go back to your villages and, live like, people supposedly did, back in the past, where everybody was happy and we were all in tune with our environment. Well, a lot of that to some degree is just our fantasies about what happened in the past. We don't actually know. There was nobody there with video cameras and tape recorders recording the whole thing. And people's lifespans for all the problems that have happened, people's lifespans in the developed world get longer every year, except in the United States. And so maybe the chemicals and the food and things like that are harming us, but the evidence is the opposite. People are living longer, they're healthier. So and one of the things that happened is that there was a point in time, not all that long ago, when the population of the world was getting so high that the amount of food that we can grow was not enough for everybody to survive. And we had what was called the Green Revolution, which is where we did start using chemical fertilizers and other kinds of things like that. And that actually saved tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of people's lives. And it allowed countries like India to be able to sustain themselves, and Bangladesh. So the technology, and the downside of it is the population of the world increased even more, which caused, is causing the problem that it's causing. If people don't have organic food, that's an opportunity for somebody to start a business providing organic food. If somebody doesn't have any of the things that we're talking about or any of the changes that we need to make, somebody has to do it. We can't count on our good natures and goodwill, because we all have good intentions that we can't follow through on, to exercise more, to do whatever, to read more, to read more substantial books. Anything like that. We have these intentions that we just simply can't follow through on. So having good intentions is good, useful, but what has to happen is that people have to be able to make it available for people to follow their good intentions, because if there's no organic food, it's hard to eat organic. If there's no COVID vaccine, you can't protect people from COVID. So I really support the effort, and as you know, of innovation and entrepreneurship. And I want to say one other thing, that studies of innovation show that innovation is not people creating new things so much as people taking things from one place and using them in another place. And so one of the advantages of us talking here about the United States and things like that is it provides an opportunity for people to listen to what's going on in a completely different world from theirs and get ideas about things that they can do in their world that can provide value to the people in their world. And we need to help them learn how to do it, and we need to help them learn how to do it in a way that doesn't lead to some of the problems that have happened in our world. But and that's what I think World Economy Talent Forum does. And so I appreciate your work, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor Donalds. And we have our new guest. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. And thank you for today's sessions. Thank you, everyone. Ma'am.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. And picking up on what Donald said, I'm losing my train of thought, but something is what Donald was talking about with countries who can't depend or maybe who are dependent on USDA, or really just the question of global hunger and the question of how we're going to feed people on this planet. And I would ask that we look, and this is outside my area of expertise, but I would ask that we look really deeply at not just how we grow food and how we grow large quantities of food, but also at the damage that we have created. One of the things that Paul Ortiz talks a lot about in his book, An African American and Latinx History of the United States, is this idea of American exceptionalism. You know, one of the myths that we are brought up with in the United States is that we do no harm, you know, that we are somehow always the heroes, always the saviors, which of course isn't true. It's very important. One of the things we all have to be doing is looking with humility at everything that we do. It's really important to look at the harmful sides of everything so that we can really work to first do no harm. And when we talk about our children, as a mother, I have a tremendous amount of faith in our children. And I do believe that this generation and future generations are going to lead bold change. But I also know, with the timeline that the UN has put out for us, that we don't have time to sit back and wait for the next generation to save us. It's our job to save their opportunities. Because if we don't make the changes that need to happen now, that need to happen fast, what they'll be able to do will have much less consequence. And so I would just like to throw out there, I know many people may not be able to access these books, but a couple of things that inspire me as we're looking toward visions for the future. There's a new book out called All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. And it's a compilation of artists, scientists, and activists, all women, leading a vision for the future. Another book, which I think is tremendous when we talk about creating empathy for our neighbors and for everyone, is Valerie Kaur's See No Stranger, a memoir and manifesto of revolutionary love. You may have heard of her quote, and all these women have TED Talks. So if you can't get the book, you can definitely look online and just look at the list of contributors and look up their TED Talks. So Valerie in 2016 gave a famous speech, or something that went viral, and the question she raised was, is this the darkness of the tomb or the darkness of the womb? And I believe it's the darkness of the womb. I believe it is our job to birth a new future. And I'd like to close with a quote from an author who really inspires me, Sonia Renee Taylor. We will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal, other than that we normalized greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, extraction, disconnection, confusion, rage, hoarding, hate, and lack. We should not long to return, my friends. We are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is actually excellent discussions. Naturally, our session is 1 hour, 30 minutes to 2 hours maximum, but we have to extend today's session because of lot of contribution, and I'm sure our audience will enjoy today's sessions very much. So I want to invite you all for the tomorrow's sessions. Thank you everyone for joining today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.